So Vinyasa Flow Yoga, it means to arrange or place in a special way. It's linking movement with breath. We recognize that it's problematic because although amazing, it's also problematic because of the rhythm, the pace, and the lack of prioritizing alignment in most classes. There's only so much you can do. And so the alignment tends to be completely secondary. So as a result of that, the areas that we see injury when we don't have an understanding of alignment is in the bendy parts of our body. And regardless of how inflexible you may think you are, our body bends organically where it's soft, and and doesn't in the areas where there is resistance. So if you're moving in and out of poses and don't understand how to build the pose from the ground up, how to apply action and dual action, when you've got maybe teachers that are pushing you to go deeper, or a lot of music playing, or a lot of aggressive students like my dad in a classroom that's kind of pushing you into your own competitiveness, you will inevitably put strain on your spine and on the joints. So the areas that we often see get most injured in the practice, regardless of if you're flexible or not, is the lower back, the neck, and the joints within the body. So what I want you to consider, I'm kind of just like bullet pointing things in my head. You want to consider the entering of a pose. And I said this a little bit before, the being in the pose and the exiting of a pose. Those are three things that we have to consider in Vinyasa Flow Yoga. It's the transitions and then the pose itself. Let's see what else I want to say. Exit, building the pose from the ground up, dual action. Okay. What we know is that for every action, you all know this, is there's an equal and opposite reaction. If you want something to go up, then we have to connect with the energy that's going down. I want to talk about the spine itself, because the key to a healthy life is a healthy and supple spine. And when the spine is aligned properly, your body maintains a relatively straight line from the head to the shoulders and back, as well as the hips and the knees and the feet. There are 4 curves in your spine, and the curves are in the sacrum, the lumbar, the thoracic part of the spine, and the cervical spine. Those four points that I just mentioned have a natural and gentle curve. In the sacrum, the curve is it concave? No, convex. It's convex. Another word for that would be kyphosis. The lumbar is concave. Another word for that would be lordosis. The thoracic, it goes back to convex, kyphosis, and then the neck is lordosis. But gentle, it's that gentle S, and that becomes like a shock absorber. And our spine is designed ultimately to keep the head on its axis, and to keep everything else balanced, stable, and maintained. Imbalances in the spine occur when there is weakness or overstretching in the ligaments, and as a result, it can cause pain, it can cause excess pressure or compression, and throwing off the skeletal balance. So in the practice of asana, what we're trying to do is to organize the bones in the most appropriate way to create what's called an optimal blueprint within the skeletal structure. And this allows us then to stretch and tone the muscles more evenly. All right, I hope that makes sense to you, because this is what I want you to consider today as we move through Surya Namaskar, and I'm breaking down the individual poses, is how do we keep the integrity of the spine? How do we engage the core as a result of maybe some weakness, but that weakness in the core can impact the back? How do we not overcompensate in one area of our skeletal structure because of muscle weakness, and as a result, overstrain another area? So this is going to be the focus this week, is really looking at building the pose from the ground up, looking at action and dual action, understanding the natural curvature of the spine, and being aware of where you, because of, even the way in which you live your life, maybe sitting in a car, sitting at a computer, all the ways in which you're consistently, and gravity, pushing into the spine, causing this compression and muscle weakness. And what yoga does is reverses it. But with proper alignment, it also is inviting you to pull back from your natural instincts. Like, for example, with someone with my kind of flexibility, if a teacher was to say to me, bend your knee as deep as you can and arch back, I'm going to go right into my lower back. I'm going to bypass any of the tightness that I might have in the psoas muscle along the hips. And I'm going to collapse into that natural concave in the lower part of the back, and push. Gravity is going to push down. All the compression is now going into the lower back. Eventually, not today maybe, but eventually this part of the spine is going to get injured. Now, if I have a teacher who's going to pull me out of my flexibility, what that means is they're going to try to find the natural harmony in my spine by always thinking, where's Tadasana? Where's mountain pose? Where is that structural balance from the pelvis up into the neck? So instead of letting me drop into my flexibility, they're going to pull me up so my knee stays over the ankle, the hips stay aligned. Now here, because of any natural tightness that I might have in the hip, if I'm keeping the tailbone into the body and I'm maintaining the integrity of the spine, then I can't really go much deeper. Right here is where I feel like my back wants to, see that, like dump into the pose. Now this, for me, feels great. This feels right, it feels normal, it feels deep and flexible, but it's injurious. This feels limited. It doesn't feel nearly as like dynamic or pretty. But this, as that psoas opens, eventually I'm going to come down into the pose without that compression. So throughout the whole of this class, I'm going to continually remind you to break some of the habits that you might have in your body, no matter how good it feels, and think more about structural integrity. All right? So the poses I'm going to be teaching you today are the poses within Surya Namaskara. So we're going to be looking at Tadasana, mountain pose, Urdhva Tadasana. We're going to be looking at Uttanasana, Ardha Uttanasana, Chaturanga Dandasana. We're going to be looking at Urdhva Mukha Svanasana, upward dog, as well as Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward dog. When we get to upward dog and when we get to Chaturanga, we're going to be utilizing a lot of the props. So go ahead and sit up tall and close your eyes. And just give yourself a moment to ground. So I always start the class. It doesn't matter if it's an alignment class, a flow class. To me, a practice without prayer, without intention, is exercise. And it has benefits on the body. It could change your body, but won't necessarily change your life. It's through the connection with Source that allows us to appreciate our bodies and each other and this planet, and open ourselves to a deeper, more wondrous connection with the divine. So take a very deep breath in. Exhale it out through the mouth. Place your palms into prayer. Calling in the God of our own unique understanding, we ask, may this practice be an opportunity to ground our body and create the necessary stability so that we can move the accumulated energy within the body and open our hearts to the power and to the presence of God within and beyond. We ask, may this practice be insightful. May it hold a mirror up to our ego and our expectations. May we stay open to learning something new. And through the groundedness of this practice, may it allow us to move through this day with more awareness, more compassion, more centering, and more grace. We ask, may this practice be blessed. And then together we offer this blessing with one single Om. Take a very deep breath in. And lower your head, your chin to your chest. Open your eyes. And then release your hands. And you're going to come into Tadasana. It all starts in Tadasana. You're going to have your blocks nearby because you're going to need your block in a moment. Tadasana is mountain pose. And so mountain pose is every pose that we do, you're always looking, where is mountain pose? Where is the structure? So your feet press, and you want to feel that connection with your foundation. You want to feel the weight evenly distributed across the balls of the feet, the heels. You can even lift your toes up off the ground. Spread them as much as you can. Now, as you spread your toes, really try to get the pinky toe to move away from the big toe as much as possible. But try to do that without spreading your fingers on your hands. Keep your hands relaxed. And then lay each toe pad down onto the floor. Notice where the weight seems to want to distribute itself. Do you tend to fall back into your heels? Do you tend to lean forward towards the balls of the feet? Just sway a little bit and notice, like, how far can your body sway forward before the backs of the heels feel like they're lifting? How far can you lean back without the front of your feet getting light? And then find that middle point. So get very, very curious about your base. If the base is ungrounded, it impacts everything that goes above it. Now, once you feel like you are finding where your bones lay right above the feet, you want to put your hands onto your thighs and firm up the thighs so the thighs are lifting up off the knees. The inner thighs roll inward towards each other. So there's a firmness of the thighs drawing in and back simultaneously. Your tailbone draws down. Now I'm going to come to my side and I'm going to take off my sweater so that you can see. So you can see here is that lordosis, that dumping into the spine. So the thighs roll in, the tailbone draws down. I'm not going to tuck the tailbone in. I'm not going to tuck it in so much that I reverse the natural curve down in the lumbar, because you do not want to do that. You want there to be that shock absorber. So there is that little curve. The frontal hip bones lift. The front ribs, as the frontal hip bones lift, the tendency then is to stick the rib cage forward. So now you've got to stitch that rib cage down. So the front ribs draw down, the frontal hip bones lift up. The arms reach down by your sides. The collarbones broaden. You want to maintain an even length in your neck, but that means that the chin comes down ever so slightly. So the back of the neck has some space and the gaze is forward. So in mountain pose, there's a firmness, but not a rigidity. So you're not so stiff as we often see in certain practices. You want to find that firmness, that intention, that pressing down to come up, feeling if one hip feels higher than the other. Just noticing. And now from here, you're going to take a block. You're going to come back into Tadasana, so find that pose. Bring the block forward in front of you with your hands on either side of the block. And you're going to bring your arms over your head. Now, if your shoulders are tight, what happens is, this is the law of compensation. As we try to get the shoulders back by the ears, which is often the instruction a teacher will give, they'll say, inhale, arms reach, arms by your ear, something like that. What happens is, to get the shoulders back by the ears, the chest pushes forward and then you arch in the lower back. So keeping the tailbone down, again, we put the importance, we build it down then up. So feet press, thighs lift, tailbone in, shoulder heads pull back. You bring your arms up as close to the ears as you can. But as soon as you begin to feel that arch, that's where you stop. When your shoulders begin to open, you will be able to get your shoulders back by the ears without that imbalance of the spine. Hold here. So the upper arm bones press. The shoulders are broadening away from the center of the spine. You're going to look up. But even as you look up, you don't want to dump your neck. Think about creating space in the cervical spine. Drop the front ribs. Shoulders back a little bit more if you can. Bring the arms forward. Again, shoulders back. And then come back into mountain. And just notice for a moment just what's happening with the shoulders, any sensation. Take a breath there. And now from here, place your palms into prayer, just for a moment. Thighs lift, tailbone in, thighs roll in internally. Inhale, arms reach. Look up, touch your palms. Exhale, bring your palms back into prayer right at your chest. So we're going to do that a few times just so that we can incorporate movement with the breath, so that you want to feel the fluidity while simultaneously feeling into the stability. So engage your Tadasana, palms right at the heart. Inhale, arms reach. It takes an entire inhale before your palms touch. And then an entire exhale as you bring your arms out to the sides and bring them back into prayer in the center of your chest. So when your palms come together, that's when the exhale is complete. So you are that present to your lung capacity. You're not rushing the breath. Often in vinyasa, we prioritize the movement to the breath. You want the breath to lead and the poses wrap themselves around the breath itself. So it's synchronized. Inhale, arms reach. Exhale. As you're reaching, you want to move the energy through the fingers so that it's not contained at the very tip of the hands. Again, inhale, don't arch. Your arms can also stop at shoulders width if that feels more in integrity. Keep the shoulders down the back. And then exhale. Palms right at the heart. From here, what you're going to do is you're going to take a block. You're going to go ahead and bend forward and put your fingertips on the floor, or you can put your fingertips on a block. Separate your feet hips width apart. You're going to take a block and put it between your upper inner thighs. Keeping the knees bent, you're going to squeeze the block, spin the thigh bones in, and then try to push the legs straight. This is that internal rotation. The block will often just give you some awareness about how to use your legs. If you're not using your legs, the block's going to fall or it's not going to feel engaged. Again, bend the knees a little, push into the feet, spin the inner thighs back. Sit bones are widening, straighten the legs. Keep the legs straight so the thigh bones are pushing back into the hamstrings. Now, of course, if your hamstrings are tight, then you would bend your knees and keep them bent. Otherwise, legs are straight. Bring your weight more towards the front of your heels because the tendency is to sit back into the heels, and then soften the spine, relaxing your head and neck. Keep spinning the inner thighs back. If the block is pushing into your rib cage, the way it is in mine right now, you push the block back a little bit. Then you're going to inhale, look up and lengthen. Stay up onto your fingertips. Your fingertips are in front of the feet themselves. Inner thighs press back. The weight shifts forward. The sternum is going to pull long off of the front body, creating more space in the waist. The shoulders, you want to be careful not to let them dump into your neck. You want to press into the arms, draw the shoulder heads back, and continue to elongate your chest forward. And then breathe. Notice if the quads are released, keep them lifted. When we're practicing vinyasa flow, because there's not a lot of time to give a myriad of instructions in the individual poses, the strokes are a little bit more broad rather than specific. We focus on what's called the 3 pillars of alignment, and I'll discuss what that is in a second. Take a deep breath in. Exhale, fold, relax the head and neck. And then as you push into the feet, inhale, come on up all the way so the belly is engaged, the spine remains in integrity. The arms come out to the sides, up over your head, look up and touch your palms. Then exhale, bring the arms out to the sides and right at the heart center. Now I'm going to remove the block. The 3 pillars of anatomy. You focus on the foot and ankle, the pelvic cavity, and the shoulder girdle. When you deliberately acknowledge what's happening in the feet and in the ankle and stabilize those areas, it protects the knee joints. When you put your awareness on the pelvic cavity, this protects the lumbar spine and keeps it from dumping into that lower back. The third, the shoulder girdle, protects the neck. So when you're teaching vinyasa flow and you're focusing on those more broad strokes, your attention is not to get injured, or if you're a teacher, not to injure anybody. So you always want to make sure feet and ankle, what's happening, pelvic cavity, what's happening, shoulder girdle. And then you get more nuanced. Bring your feet together. Also, if you're a beginner student, not even a beginner student, actually it makes way more sense to me even as a more advanced student, is keeping the feet separated hips width apart is way more structurally sound. The hips and the ankles, or rather the ankles, living underneath the hip bones is way more solid than when you bring your feet together. So if it feels better for you to practice this with the feet hips width, by all means. Feet press, thighs lift, tailbone in, palms at the heart. So now we incorporate the breath. Inhale, arms reach. Look up if you can, touch your palms. Exhale, fold. As you fold forward, either keep your spine straight and your core engaged, or bend your knees a little bit so that you can maintain the length of the spine. If your hamstrings are tight and you try to straighten the legs, it'll pull at the pelvis and round your back, creating that kyphosis, that thickness in the upper part of the spine. So better to bend the knees to keep the extension of the spine. Fingertips to the floor or onto the shins. Inhale, look up and lengthen, drawing the shoulder heads back and keeping the belly engaged. Then exhale, fold, releasing the head and neck and bringing the sternum downward towards the ankles. Then inhale, come on up to stand with a flat back if you can. Legs are either straight or knees bent. And exhale, palms right at the heart. So now let's do it a couple of times and just find a little bit more of that rhythm, but without losing that awareness of pressing down to lift up and keeping the integrity of the spine. Inhale, arms reach. Exhale, fold all the way forward. Relax the head and neck. Inhale, look up and lengthen. Shoulders down the back. Exhale, fold. And inhale, come on up all the way. Arms reach. And palms right at the heart as you exhale. So there's a lot going on there, and you can see most of the time we just like pump out Surya Namaskara and get really mindless in the pose. But when you slow it down, and that's key, vinyasa is often taught way too fast, but as your lung capacity develops, you can see how slow, how mindful these movements are and can be. So now I'm going to break down Chaturanga Dandasana, but we're going to be doing this in a little bit of a different way. So I want you to face your wall. Put your hands onto the wall. And we're going to come into what's called box on the wall. So you're going to walk back a little bit, get your wrists right where your shoulders are, your ankles underneath your hips. Let your ears align with your upper inner arms. Press the arms straight. Let the shoulders wrap away from the neck. So there's the shoulders pull down and then open away from the neck. So there's a broadening. The scapula lay flat and wrap more forward. And just take a couple of breaths here just to warm up the shoulders. My feet are hips width apart here. Inhale, lift your chest up. Now from here, you're going to walk your feet back a little bit, and you're going to come up onto the balls of the feet. You're going to walk your hands up a little bit. The wrists are slightly above where your elbows are. You may have to readjust here. I have to make sure I'm in the right position. And then, let's see, you're going to bend the elbows just a little bit. Squeeze the elbows in. Let the chest begin to pull down between the upper inner arms. You're only going part way here. Draw your tailbone in so you can feel that as you're working into the upper back to compensate for a core that might be a little bit weaker, will arch the back. So you want to keep that tailbone in. Bend the elbows a little more, squeeze the elbows in. And then straighten the arms and come into Tadasana. From here, you're going to need your blocks. First, though, I want to show an alternative to Chaturanga Dandasana, which requires a lot of arm strength, a lot of joint support, core strength, but it really puts a lot of pressure on the wrists. And so sometimes we find that people in the vinyasa practice really strain themselves in the wrists because of doing Chaturanga, wanting to do Chaturanga, but doing it before they actually have the strength in the correct areas, in the triceps, etc., to be able to support it. So come into a plank position, and I'm going to show you first what I would recommend. Now, my elbows hyperextend, and I'm going to show you what that looks like right now for those of you who do it. You see how my inner elbow comes forward and the back of my elbow pushes in? This feels straight to me. This feels straight, it feels supportive. But it means that this part of my arm is overstretched, which means this part of the ligaments, the tendons, the muscles, everything is understretched. It's weaker here. It's weaker on both sides. So if you have hyperextension, you want to make sure the elbows remain slightly bent, which it feels bent to me on your end. It's going to look straighter. And the elbows are turning in slightly. And I'm gripping the arms, meaning the muscles are pulling in. This feels like I'm gripping, but it's not. Tailbone in. You're going to put your knees down, extend the toes back. Now, as I bend, just like what I did on the wall, I'm going to pull the elbows in. I'm going to elongate the chest forward, and I'm going to slowly lower my body to the floor. I'm not going to collapse. And then from here, you're going to come into Cobra, which you keep your pelvis on the floor. The elbows draw in. The shoulders pull away from the ears, down the back. The feet press, the kneecaps lift, and you lift your chest part way up. Then chest comes down, knees release, toes curl under, and now you reverse it. You push down into the hands, you keep your core engaged, you lift your chest and your belly and your thighs up off the ground. And then you're gonna extend the toes away and repeat that. For those who want to explore Chaturanga, I think I'll do it this way. Let me think, do I want to do it this way first? Yes. You're going to put your hands onto blocks. You're going to curl your toes under. You want, just like Tadasana, the inner thighs lift up, the tailbone draws down, the side waist elongates, the shoulder heads pull down the back, careful with the hyperextension, and then you're going to slowly rolling forward onto the toes a little bit, lower part way down, and then release your chest between the blocks. So you want to get your elbows over the wrists and ultimately at a right angle. So let's do this again. Curl the toes under. The shoulders are over the wrists. The chest pulls forward. The heels press back as I elongate the waist. Come forward onto the toes a little bit. Now, as I come forward onto the toes, that means my shoulders pitch slightly forward of my wrist. That's okay, because as I lower, that should begin to give me the correct, alignment. Now take a breath and then release. And now I'm going to lead you through it again, but this time I'm not going to demonstrate it because I can't talk and demonstrate that particular pose at the same time. So arms are straight, hands are onto the block, heels press back, sternum forward. The inner thighs spin up towards the ceiling. The lower belly is engaged. You take a deep breath in. On the exhale, begin to slowly lower your chest until the upper arms are aligned with the side ribs. So you're not quite at a right angle. You're higher up. Keep your chest forward and the gaze forward, and then get your shoulders down the back, and then release. Okay, now from here, you're going to take your blocks and you're going to turn them at a 45-degree angle. You're going to lay down onto the floor and you're going to rest your shoulder tips. Your shoulders are right on the block. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm hoping you can see. So the block is at an angle. My shoulders are laying right on the block, but now I have to slide the block up a little bit because I need to have space for my hands onto the floor. So what I'm going to do here is, instead of relying on my strength for this pose, this is going to let me understand my tailbone and the core muscles, and also allow me to understand the placement of the scapula in Chaturanga. So toes curl under, kneecaps lift, the tailbone draws down, and the frontal hip bones lift, the lower belly is engaged. From here, I'm going to push into the hands and just lift my hips up off the ground. So my shoulders are resting onto the blocks. You should be able to maintain. Keep the elbows pressing in, elongate the sternum forward, keep your tail in, squeeze the shoulder blades inward. Push into the hands and release. Extend the toes back, take a breath. Again, curl your toes under, kneecaps lift, tail in, and then lift. Press the elbows in. And I want you to notice here the ways in which the shoulder slopes down. And then release. So now, take that block and turn it the next level up. So rather than flat, turn it up. And the same thing, rest your shoulders. This is going to bring us a little bit more to the 4 or 5 inches that we are off the floor. So the shoulders and the elbows will be on the same line, rather than what often happens is that slope down in the shoulders. Hands, the palms press, toes curl under, lift the kneecaps first, press the heels back, inner thighs lift, and then pressing down, lift it up, readjust the tailbone, squeeze the elbows in, and now pull the sternum forward. So push into your palms as you drag the front part of your body forward. And breathe. Gaze is forward. And then release. Take a breath. Again, curl your toes under. Lift the knees, push back through the heels, draw your tailbone down, push into the hands, then lift, really feeling into the core. The elbows press in, the shoulder blades squeeze, and the sternum elongates. And release. And now from here, come back into child's pose for a moment. So Chaturanga Dandasana is really a challenging pose. And it's definitely a pose within the vinyasa practice, because it's Chaturanga, upward dog, downward dog, those 3 poses that make up, when they say go through the vinyasa, those are the poses. So you can see how problematic it can be on the wrists when you're doing that kind of repetition and you don't quite yet have the strength in the triceps. You can see that when I'm engaging the pose, it's coming from this part. Most of the time, when people come into Chaturanga, if they're not making a modification, here's an example what it might look like. You see that? So if I was in Tadasana, my Tadasana would be like that. So much pressure in the spine, so much thickening as a result in this part of the back and a collapse here. Or it might look like that. And you can see what's happening here in the neck, in the elbows, so much strain. So these are some of the ways in which we can begin to understand what the muscles, which parts of the body are being, where we have trouble accessing, and how we can use some of these props to help us connect to those parts of our musculature with less strain. Here's another one I'll give you. This one's really good too. I'm not as big of a fan of it. I broke my breastbone when I was a kid, so I don't like anything that rests on this part of my chest. So this one can often be problematic for me, but I want to show it to you anyway. You're going to rest your pelvis onto the block. The block is sideways on the mat, and the other block is going to rest onto your chest. There you go. The elbows come back, or rather the wrists come back, so they're under the elbows. The elbows press in, tailbone down, chest forward, breathe. So there is an example of your Chaturanga. You can even take your hands off the floor, and you can begin to feel what has to happen in your back. The shoulders lift away from the floor. They draw away from the neck. The elbows press in. The weight stays even on the hands. The inner thighs lift, and as you take your tailbone in, you can feel either the very tip of your pubic bone or the base of your hip bones push into the block. And then knees down, and then press back into child's pose. Take a breath. Now from here, you're going to take your chair. I think I'm going to give you 3 ways to explore upward dog. So you understand that Chaturanga, what happens? Now we're going to move into upward facing dog. I showed you cobra before. In upward facing dog, I'm going to put my hands right now onto the chair, and I'm going to step my feet back. Kind of like what I did earlier with using the wall to demonstrate Chaturanga. I'm now going to let my pelvis come forward and rest onto the edge of the chair. This is where, though, you have to maybe make some adjustments until you can get that right positioning. Then from here, the inner thighs lift. The hands press. Now I'm going to lift my hips up off the chair. Bend the elbows a little bit if you hyperextend. The elbows press in. Then the chest lifts. And then you gently look upward. Use those legs a lot. So the inner thighs lift. The arms press. It's the sternum that's lifting. So the back bend is not happening too actively in the lower back. It's more in the upper thoracic part of the spine. And then exhale, press back into a variation of downward dog on the chair. So the hands are now on the seat. The feet press flat. From here, for those of you who are new to working with me in posture labs are the way in which I love to practice. These are static poses that you hold for a little bit longer time. You isolate them from movement. In the practice of vinyasa, you have poses that are driven by movement and poses that are static. And vinyasa students tend to hate to stay in static poses for long periods of time because a lot of stuff comes up. A lot of ego, a lot of emotion, a lot of sensation. So we want to move from pose to pose to pose. But when we get later into the practice, down the road, and I'm talking more about the mind-body connection and also the psychology of the student that tends to be oriented towards vinyasa flow, that avoidance shows up in other areas of life. And so this is the practice that challenges me more psychologically, even more than it does physically. So I do it more and more in my practice, this kind of isolation. And why I'm mentioning this is, for those of you who've been with me for a while, you know that every once in a while I will teach a pose that I've been doing for ages, but I've actually never articulated out loud because the way in which I used to teach publicly, these are poses I didn't often teach. So every once in a while you'll see that I will stumble over my words, I will stop and start again until I can find that articulation. This might be one of them. So you're going to place your bolster onto your chair. You're also going to have a block. I'm going to put the block here for now. I'm going to find my way back where my pelvis is on the chair and now my stomach is up against the bolster. I'm now going to put my hands onto the chair. I'm going to take a block and I'm going to put the block right on top of the edge of the chair. The back of the block pushes up against the wall. The legs are straight and strong. I'm either going to keep the hands onto the chair and squeeze the elbows in, or you're going to release the arms around behind you, interlace your fingers, stretch the inner arms straight, lift them up off, push into the block, and then lift your chest. And then release, put your hands back onto the chair, and I'm going to bend the knees a little bit and slowly drop the knees down because I want to keep the integrity of the spine, and I'm going to sit back onto the heels. Take a breath. Now from here, I'm going to get rid of the chair, but I am going to keep that bolster nearby. I'm going to take my blocks. I'm going to put my blocks long way. I'm going to curl the toes under. I'm going to begin to put the knees down and extend the toes back. You want to make sure that the wrists are directly under the shoulders. I'm going to be very careful about that hyperextension. So the elbows are not facing forward. They're turning slightly in. I'm going to bend the elbows and press the elbows in. You push down into the feet. You lift the knees. You push down into your hands and you straighten the arms without hyperextending. The inner thighs roll upward. Remember that block between the legs? That's the same action you want to feel. The shoulder heads are going to pull back and the sternum is going to lift. So you don't want to push into your hands and push into your lower back. You want to find that lift and then gaze up without collapsing the neck. And then knees down. Keep your hands on your block, toes together. Come back into child's pose for a moment. Keeping the arms straight. And then come on up. You're going to put the blocks to the side. And now from here, you're going to put your bolster onto the floor. I'm going to put my hands in front of the bolster and rest my pelvis right onto the bolster itself. Feet pressed, toes spread. Kneecaps lift. Wrists are under the shoulders. Arms work straight. Bend the elbows again. Push the elbows in so you feel your shoulder blades squeeze towards each other. Lift the sternum. Then press the arms straighter. Gaze forward. So you want your shoulders over the wrists. Often when we come into upward facing dog, the shoulders can be pitched forward over the fingertips and the shoulders collapse in. That causes so much discomfort on the wrists themselves. So you want to make sure that there's a better balance. If you feel that it's too much in the lower back, then I recommend Cobra until you begin to develop that more innate flexibility, and it can take some time. Don't be in a rush to get into a pose like this when it can be so compromising. And I don't mean with the bolster. The bolster is actually, it's a very supportive choice, but I mean when we don't use any props. And then exhale, knees down. Come back into child's pose. You can keep your arms on the bolster. Relax your head and neck. Inhale, come up. You're going to get rid of the bolster. And now from here, you're going to take a block. We're going to come into downward facing dog. So Adho Mukha Svanasana. Your thumb is going to be along the long side of the block. Your index finger is going to be along the short side. You do not want the block to go right into that V. You want there to be some space. So hands press, curl your toes under, inhale, arch your back, and then press back, keeping the knees bent. You're going to lift the shins and the knees up off the floor. Look at your hands. Make sure your fingers are spread nice and wide. With the block here and that space between the thumb and the index finger, press the bone under the index finger down. Careful not to hyperextend, so turn the elbows inward towards each other. And if you hyperextend, keep a very slight bend to the arms. Reach into the floor so that you can push the arms as straight as you can. Elongate through the side waist. Careful if you're really flexible not to arch into that lumbar. Keep the tailbone drawing away. And don't tuck though. You don't want to tuck and create that kyphosis. Nor do you want to collapse and make that lordosis. You want to find that natural balance. Keep the knees bent, the inner thighs pressing back. If you can, begin to descend the heels downward towards the ground so that the calves are extending down into the Achilles. The feet are straight. And then walk your feet to your hands. You're going to remove the block, hands to the hips, flat back to stand. All right, now from here, we're going to put this all together. We're going to do it. I'm going to do it with you in a rhythm of a flow. I'm going to do it once with some adjustments, and then we'll do it in another way without those adjustments so that you have the alternatives. Come into Tadasana. Feet press, thighs lift, tailbone in, thighs roll in, arms extend, palms at the heart. Linking movement with breath, keeping the front ribs down. Inhale, arms reach, look up, keep the elongation in the side waist. Exhale, fold. Either bending your knees, keep your chest elongating, fingertips on the floor or on your shins. Inhale, straighten the legs, look up and lengthen. Keep the shoulders pulling down the back. Then exhale, fold, fingertips to the floor, relax your head and neck. Inhale, Come on up all the way, arms reach, and exhale, palms at the heart. Just take a moment. And now I'll take you through the full rhythm. Inhale, arms reach. Exhale, fold, bend the knees, fingertips down on the floor, relax your head and neck. Inhale, look up and lengthen. Keep your knees bent. You're going to step your right leg way back. Now the palms can go flat. Push into your palms, step the left leg back, hold. Find the elongation in the front of the body and the stability in your hands and your feet. Take a deep breath in. Exhale, knees down. Toes extend away. Keep your elbows bending and pulling in towards the rib cage as you lower your chest to the floor. From here, push into your feet, lift the kneecaps, push into the palms and lift your chest partway up off the ground. Continue to let your elbows pull in, the shoulder blades squeeze in, the sternum lifts. Exhale, chest down, knees down, curl your toes under, and now reverse that push-up. So you're going to lift your chest, thighs up off the ground, then shift your hips back. Keeping the knees bent, you lift them up off the ground, come into downward dog, and slowly descend the heels towards the floor if you can. Take a couple of breaths, and then walk your feet to your hands. Inhale, look up and lengthen, bending your knees if you need to so you can continue to get the length in the spine. Exhale, fold, releasing the neck completely. Inhale, push down into the feet, arms out to the sides, the legs straight, the arms reach, you touch your palms. Then exhale, palms back at the heart. So that's an example of Surya Namaskara A. And now we'll do it again, but we'll add Chaturanga and upward facing dog. This one I'm not going to call out some of the alternatives. I'll just do it with, I'll be calling out straight legs. It doesn't mean though that you can't take those alternatives for yourself. Feet press, thighs lift. Thighs roll in, tailbone down. Belly is back. Inhale, arms reach. Exhale, fold all the way forward, fingertips to the floor. Relax your head and neck. Inhale, look up and lengthen, shoulders down the back. Exhale, bend your knees a little bit. Step your right leg back, your left leg back. The inner thighs lift, tail in. Keep the sternum elongating. Come forward onto your toes. Lower 5 inches off the floor. Keep the belly lifted, tailbone down. Inhale, extend the toes back. You're going to push into the palms. Inner thighs lift. Shoulder heads pull back. Sternum rises. The gaze is upward towards the ceiling. And exhale, downward facing dog. Push down into the hands so you build the pose from the ground up. If that foundation is in any way irrelevant, it throws off the whole structure of the pose. Fingers press, palms press, arms reach, inner thighs stretch back, heels descend. At the end of the exhale, walk your feet to your hands. Inhale, look up and lengthen. Get your weight forward of the heels. Keep the weight forward of the heels and exhale, fold. And then inhale, push into the feet. Arms reach, tail in, and exhale. Palms right at the heart. Now I'm going to teach it to you one more time. This one's going to be a little bit more fluid with the attention on the breath itself. Once you understand some of the nuances, it becomes more second nature, and now your attention goes on the breath, and in the future I'll teach you about drishti, the eye gaze. All of this is designed to keep you present. Inhale, arms reach. Exhale, fold. Inhale, look up and lengthen. Exhale, step back, top of a push-up, and lower. Inhale, upward dog. Exhale, downward dog, and breathe. Keep the shoulders rolling open away from the neck. The inner thigh stretching back. The side waist nice and long. Take another very deep breath. This time, you're going to bend your knees and jump through to sitting. Extend your legs straight out in front of you. Reach underneath your buttocks, pull the flesh back. Inhale, arms reach. Exhale, fold, grab what you can. Inhale, lengthen. And exhale, fold. And just allow yourself this moment just to get as quiet as you can here. Feeling the effects of Surya Namaskara on your body, which is more stimulating. It increases mobility, range of motion, flexibility, strength. It purifies. It helps to relieve stress and anxiety. Helps for hormonal balance and even insomnia. Inhale, come on up. And roll all the way out until you're laying flat on your back. If you want to do a supported shavasana here, you can take your bolster and put it underneath your spine. So you're not sitting up on the bolster. It's supporting the lumbar. Head relaxes. You can even take another blanket and put it up so your head is slightly elevated and there's space for the neck. Once you find your pose, just get as comfortable as you can. Take a deep breath in. Exhale it out completely. The next few moments, just let everything go. My hope for all of us is that we can practice like my dad up until the moments that we take those last breaths, that it becomes such an important part of your life and your self-care. Practicing yoga, regardless of the style that you prefer, changes us on a cellular level because it moves the energy and it creates space. It allows us to get more centered and present, and as a result, influences how we show up for the rest of our day, especially in the face of conflict and in crisis. We apply the principles of this practice. Get grounded, focus, breathe, and presence. And it allows us to be less reactive and more responsive and therefore responsible, making choices that are healthier, more loving, and more compassionate, which is necessary in these very complex and uncertain times that we find ourselves in. We want to break the habits that we have in our body. Habits that can be injurious, but also don't allow for the free flow of energy, especially in the uninvestigated parts of the musculature. It's in the tension where we will find both release and relief. It's in the tension that we find the insight and the reconciliation. So we don't want to avoid what is hard or resistant. We want to befriend it, understand it, because only then can it be transformed. Let everything go. And rest. Bring your attention back to your breath. Take a deep breath in. And you're going to bend your knees and place the soles of the feet onto the floor. And then roll to your side. And if you're on a bolster, just gently roll off the bolster. And then press up into a seated position. And sit up as tall as you can, your palms in Dhyana Mudra, the thumbs touch. Remembering that that triangle represents Sangha, community, Dharma, our purpose, and enlightenment, the awakening that we have when we do the inner work necessary to move us into direct relationship with our true nature. Let's take a moment just to sit, remembering that we use these physical practices as a way to release the toxins and the tension so that we can sit comfortably in meditation and in prayer for longer periods of time without distraction. That it is part of the 8-limb pathway of yoga that leads to liberation. But in and of itself, it's not the whole story. But it most certainly holds a mirror up to our humanity, our limiting beliefs, and our ego, and reminds us continually that we cannot change what we won't see. Yoga pulls the veil back and allows us to see and through svadhyaya, self-study, and tapas, discipline, that we open to Ishvara Pranadhana, which is surrendering to the divine as we know it to be, that is within. Place your palms into prayer, and together we take a very deep breath in. Exhale it out through the mouth. And we close this practice by giving thanks to God always for our bodies, for our health, for our wellness, for all the resources that we have access to, the air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink, the relationships that we're a part of. We ask never to take a second of this journey for granted, but instead always be willing to live in awe and in wonder for the mystery and for the beauty of it all. We ask for more clarity, for more skills, for more patience, for more understanding, for more compassion, for more love, so that we can show up for ourselves, this planet, and each other, and do what needs to be done in order to create peace. And then together we offer this blessing with one single Om. Take a deep breath in. Lower your chin to your chest, open your eyes, and inhale, come up. Thank you so much for class. Namaste.